Why does everyone hate this music industry mogul? As recently as 2 months ago, a very well-known name in music history made headlines yet again. Irving Azoff. A man named Irving. A lot of you got mad at me in one of my episodes because I said a man named Irving. And I got so many comments of people being like, a man named Irving? Do you mean Irving Azoff? And it's like, yeah, I did. A man named Trump. Like, I just say that. It's a phrase I use. A man named Irving. Yes, I was talking about Irving Azoff. If you have absolutely no idea who Irving Azoff is, then buckle up because this guy has been dominating the industry for decades. And it doesn't look like he's about to be going anywhere anytime soon either. Irving Azoff was born on December 12, 1947, and has managed some of the most prominent artists in the music industry, including, but not limited to, the Eagles, Christina Aguilera, Steely Dan, Jimmy Buffett, Stevie Nicks, Bon Jovi, Van Halen, Earth, Wind & Fire, the Doobie Brothers, Gwen Stefani, and more and more and more. And at one point, Joe Walsh even lived in Irving's car for a while, supposedly. Irving was born in Danville, Illinois, which by 1950, just a few years after his birth, had a population of approximately 30,000 people. So it was a pretty established town when Irving was born. He was born to 31-year-old Louis and 28-year-old Edith. Louis and Edith were both very strong in their Jewish faith. The year of 1950 was actually a peak year for the Jewish community in Danville, Illinois. They saw a record number of almost 50 children attending Sunday school at the local synagogue there. And the Azoffs were grateful to be in that location and to be able to raise their one and only child in that type of community. Louis was a pharmacist in Danville and was known as being the go-to person, not just for physical ailments, but pretty much for anything. And Edith was a homemaker and a bookkeeper, and she took great pride in keeping a clean and happy home for her husband and for Irving. In addition to Irving attending Sunday school services at the synagogue, he also attended the local junior high and high school in Danville. While most children were interested in playing sports or other after-school activities, Irving enjoyed observing his father's work ethic in the pharmacy and took note of his father's entrepreneurial spirit. It was just something he really admired about his dad. So when Irving entered high school, he felt as though he was finally old enough to start his own endeavor. And I don't think he formally incorporated himself or had an LLC at this point, but he did start booking and promoting a local band in town called the One-Eyed Jacks. Irving had an inkling he might have been born to do this because he absolutely loved the fast-paced and social aspect of being a manager like this. He was able to get out of the house and around Danville, Illinois, and network with people in town. He was overall just loving the energy that went along with booking and promoting the One-Eyed Jacks. It was through managing the One-Eyed Jacks in high school, Irving met the most interesting people and built a network foundation for himself in the music scene. After graduating high school, Irving attended the University of Illinois, where he studied political science. But while most of his schoolmates were going home and studying for tests or working on projects, Irving was spending all his time outside of class networking with musicians and venues and booking and promoting all the bands he could get his hands on the campus. When Irving was about 23 years old, he approached a local musician named Neil Dowdy, who had just founded his band with fellow bandmate Alan, and they were calling themselves REO Speedwagon. Irving, of course, offered to be their manager. Just a few months into managing REO Speedwagon, Irving knew he was onto something good with them. He left the University of Illinois to help expand REO Speedwagon's reach. He also had started managing Dan Fogelberg and wanted to continue to not only expand the reach for these two artists, but expand his portfolio of artists as well. He arranged for tours for them and quickly knew that they had to move to LA in order to really expand their network. And moving to LA really catapulted Irving's career. He initially took a job as a booking agent at Jerry Heller's Heller Fischel agency. Soon after relocating to LA, Irving was also able to get REO Speedwagon a recording contract with Epic Records. The band released their first self-titled debut album in 1971, and that really marked the beginning of their recording career. And also in 1971, Dan Fogelberg sent Irving an article about a man named Geffen. The article was in Rolling Stone, and Dan was telling Irving, look at this article. It looks like this guy, David Geffen, and his new label is really basically like a safe haven for progressive artists. And Irving replied and said, okay, Dan, yeah, I'll reach out to the guy. And Irving looked up David Geffen's phone number and urged David to listen to a recording of Dan. Not only did David listen to Dan's tape and love it, he also really admired Irving's go-getter attitude and offered Irving a job. Irving went to work for David Geffen, and through this time, he met not only his future wife, but several very key players in his life. And through David Geffen, Irving met Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh had recently left a band called the James Gang and was eager to embark on a solo career at this time. Irving recognized the talent in Joe Walsh and agreed to be his manager. Meanwhile, a man named Cameron Crowe was in high school and frequently hanging out backstage at shows in San Diego with nothing but a tape recorder and questions for whoever was in town and whoever would talk to him. And one day, Chris Christopherson comes to play this venue, and Cameron strikes up a conversation with Chris. In this conversation with Chris Christopherson, Chris mentions a Bob Dylan album to Cameron that he was recording in Mexico that nobody knew about. So Cameron calls a contact at Rolling Stone and tells them he's got an exclusive story about a Bob Dylan album. He says he's a reporter, even though he really isn't one, at least not yet. He was 16 years old at the time, but his contact, without even knowing anything about him, except for the fact that he has this exclusive story, gave him the opportunity to write the story, and that ended up being Cameron's first story with Rolling Stone ever. And this was all around 1973. It was in 1974, Irving Azoff started managing the Eagles. And this did not include Joe Walsh, not yet, but Irving was also managing Joe Walsh as a solo artist. He also stopped working for David Geffen and branched out on his own, forming his own company called Frontline Management. By February of 1975, Cameron, our little backstage loiterer, was now very well established at Rolling Stone, and he ends up picking out Joe Walsh for an interview. Right after that Rolling Stone interview, Joe Walsh actually helped Cameron get Led Zeppelin on the March 13th, 1975 Rolling Stone cover. And this was huge for Cameron. He was forever grateful to Joe Walsh and Irving, and the three of them became really good friends in addition to business contacts. It was also in late 1975, Joe Walsh joined forces with the Eagles after Bernie Leadon one day went out to get a hot dog. It never came back. Basically, I'm being a little bit dramatic, but that is sort of how Bernie left. He went to get a hot dog, joined that religious group, ended up in Hawaii. But Irving was already managing the Eagles, and he was separately already managing Joe Walsh. So it was only natural for Irving to recommend Joe Walsh join them in place of Bernie. And under Irving's management, the Eagles soared off the charts. But obtaining all this fame and success wasn't easy by any means. Irving knew he had to be able to play hardball in his negotiations with record contracts, touring arrangements, and marketing efforts. He wasn't afraid to challenge record labels or promoters or anyone else for that matter in order to get the absolute best deal possible for the Eagles band members. And not only did his tough, confrontational attitude benefit the Eagles in the 1970s, it also gave Irving a reputation of being one of the toughest and most feared, sort of in a good way, managers in the industry. And let me put it this way. If you were Irving's client, no one in the industry was going to take advantage of you. Irving was going to make sure of that. And while some people saw his ruthless approach as creating friction in the industry, many others saw it as a form of strength and a quality that any manager should try to emulate. And while the Eagles weren't the only act under Irving's wing in the 1970s, he was also seeing a lot of success with other acts in his portfolio. Dan Fogelberg, Steely Dan, Jimmy Buffett, REO Speedwagon was still one of his clients, but the Eagles were definitely his crown jewel. His other crown jewel was a woman named Shelley, who was actually the receptionist at Frontline Management during that whole transition from David Geffen, and he and Shelley just instantly hit it off and fell in love. He continued to date Shelley throughout the 1970s, and by 1978, the two of them were married. After working as the receptionist at Frontline Management, Shelley went on to become an agent to several players on the U.S. national soccer team. And honestly, Shelley was very instrumental in helping soccer become what it is in America today. Together, Irving and Shelley had 4 children, and as of 2024, they have been happily married for about 46 years. By 1980, Irving was also expanding expanding his industry skills more and more, and looking into concert promotion in addition to managing his artists. The Eagles broke up, and Irving knew he had to pivot and adjust quickly, or he'd risk a career lull. Even though Live Nation Entertainment hadn't been officially formed yet, Irving started laying what you could describe as the groundwork for the live entertainment space in the early 80s. And it really all started for Irving because, as an artist manager, he would get really frustrated with the fact he didn't have more control over his clients' live performances. He wanted more autonomy in every aspect of the live shows, from the venues they were playing at, to the ticket prices, to the promotional efforts that surrounded the shows. And Irving knew that by getting more involved in concert promotion, he could ensure his clients received the best possible treatment and maximize their earnings from these tours. And it was an easy and natural progression for Irving to go into concert promotion more and more, since he'd already had years of touring experience under his belt, and he had already developed really strong relationships with key figures in the concert promotion industry. But pivoting into concert promotion and leveraging his company, Frontline Management, wasn't enough for Irving. He also wanted to dig deeper into record label operations. And in 1983, Irving Azoff became the chairman of MCA Music Entertainment Group. MCA was a record label that had been launched in 1962 and had already been home to many successful artists over the years, including Elton John, Lynyrd Skynyrd, and many more. After it was created in 1962, it absolutely exploded in the 60s and 70s, but so did rumors about MCA's ties with the Mafia. But the correlation between MCA and the Mafia is an entire Roots documentary in itself. However, many people continue to bring up this correlation when remembering Irving coming in and taking over as chairman, because Irving was already known for being absolutely ruthless in his negotiations, a trait many say would have been admired and accepted by the Mafia, something that may or may not have gotten him that position at MCA. Now, after Irving came into MCA, he absolutely cleaned house. Within just a year, like not even a year of Irving's arrival at MCA, MCA had dropped 41 of its 46 acts, and Irving began leading efforts to rebuild the MCA roster from the ground up. But his efforts proved to be successful. In just those 6 years that Irving was overseeing operations, MCA had risen to the #2 record company in the USA. The one thing I really admire about Irving is he knows when to move on and when to pivot. He didn't overstay his welcome in any realm of success. As soon as his time was up with the Eagles and they reached their peak of success, he pivoted into Frontline Management and then pivoted into MCA. And after 6 years at MCA, once he's reached peak success, he pivots again. He leaves MCA and launches another record company called Giant Records. He created this label as a subsidiary of Warner Music Group in 1990, and under this label, he signed an array of artists, including MC Hammer, Steely Dan, Chicago, Brian Wilson, Kenny Rogers, and many, many more. He also negotiated for Warner Music Group to acquire a minority stake in his other company, Frontline Management. It appeared as though Irving was 100% focused on record label operations at this time, but he was also constantly keeping his eyes and ears open, observing the concert promotion operations and ticketing behind all of these tours and live events. He started partnering with other industry titans in the 80s and exploring more opportunities in film and television, but despite dabbling in film and TV, and despite all these other partnerships, he kept going back to the concept of concert promotion. He still wanted to be more involved in that arena, but he hadn't exactly figured out how he was going to do that yet. The whole decade of the 90s for Irving was really a decade of keeping his hand on the wheel and foot on the gas pedal. And by the mid-1990s, between Frontline Management and Giant Records, Irving Azoff was the man behind probably anyone you can think of. Honestly, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac, Journey. I think I already said Chicago earlier. Did I mention Van Halen? Van Halen, Neil Diamond. And things were going really well for Irving and his companies, and they were also going really well for a little company called Ticketmaster, which had been formed in the 1970s, and Irving had been eyeing their operations for a long time. And then in 1996, under the initial name of SFX Entertainment, media mogul Robert FX Sillerman launched what we know today as Live Nation. Live Nation owned and operated hundreds of venues globally and was an event promoter and venue operator. And in 2008, Irving orchestrated a deal with Ticketmaster. If you remember, I mentioned a few minutes ago how Irving had struck a deal with Warner Brothers to purchase a minority stake in Frontline management. Well, in 2008, Irving orchestrates a deal with Ticketmaster, where Ticketmaster will now buy out Warner Music's $123 million minority stake in Frontline management and also issue restricted stock to Irving, representing about 4.5% of Ticketmaster's total stock. They canceled a portion of Irving's equity stake in Frontline management, but in exchange for that, offered Irving the position of CEO at Ticketmaster. And this might have been an offer that others would have refused, because since Live Nation had really taken over, Ticketmaster was looking more and more like an obsolete, almost archaic operation. Now, leading up to 2007, Ticketmaster was the dominant provider of ticket services and controlled about 80% of the market. Live Nation was also the largest concert promoter and controlled more than 75 concert venues in the United States alone, and was actually Ticketmaster's largest customer up until 2007 because Live Nation was utilizing Ticketmaster and their software. But in 2007, Live Nation decided they would invest in their own proprietary software so they could manage all aspects of ticketing on their own. And immediately, Ticketmaster not only lost its biggest customer, but they also gained their one and only biggest competitor in the market, Live Nation. And Live Nation started to dominate them with an arguably bigger and better software system. But Irving saw this as an opportunity in 2008. So when he made this deal with Ticketmaster, he was doing so because he had a vision. Not even just a few months after Irving became CEO, it was the beginning of 2009, when Live Nation announced they had reached an agreement with Ticketmaster. Everyone was certain the DOJ would deny this proposal, but they didn't. And in 2010, Ticketmaster and Live Nation merged together to become Live Nation Entertainment. Irving became the executive chairman of Live Nation Entertainment, and the previous CEO of Live Nation became the CEO of this merged entity. Now, for the last 10 years, fury has surrounded the monopolization of ticketing via Live Nation Entertainment. And like it or not, Irving was the man pulling all the strings behind the scenes. But also, like it or not, he is one of the few people in the industry who has maintained not only a stable career, but a stable home life as well. And honestly, that's something I quite admire about Irving. There's a lot of negative rhetoric around him, but I really don't think he's someone who's ever been overly unwarranted or overly abrasive in an unwarranted way in his actions. I mean, you look at someone like Don Henley and all the lawsuits he has brought upon himself and brought upon to others. It seems to me like Don Henley is just an angry person who likes to inflict his own negative energy into the lives of others. While with Irving, though, I don't get that feeling. Do I think he's tough when he needs to be tough? Yes, but I also think that's admirable. You can't help but have a really deep appreciation for someone who was born in Danville, Illinois, to a pharmacist and a bookkeeper, and goes on and reaches this type of success not only in his career, but in his marriage and his home life as well. Irving and Shelley have also done a lot of really incredible things for their community and for this country. Not only did Shelley play a major role in U.S. soccer, but she was also the driving force behind a $150 million project where she remodeled an iconic LA venue called the Fabulous Forum. When she and Irving learned the city was going to tear it down, they were absolutely distraught and couldn't bear the thought of the city tearing down such an iconic place filled with so much history. And this was a beloved venue in LA, so to have it torn down would have been devastating. But they stepped up and ultimately revitalized it to be a very artist-friendly space. And then all the other venues in the area started trying to emulate that type of rehabilitation with their own buildings, which is just a really positive force for the community. They've also been heavily involved and supportive of an organization called the City of Hope. The City of Hope is a leading research, treatment, and education center for cancer, diabetes, and other life-threatening diseases. In 2011, Shelley and Irving were honored with the Spirit of Life Award, which salutes those who have exemplified the ideals and values of this organization. They also founded the Azoff Company in 2018, which is a privately held media and entertainment company that's dedicated to investing in businesses that put artists and fans first. The company is based in LA and has a portfolio that includes Full Stop Management, Global Music Rights, Oakview Group, and Lane One. All of these business ventures Irving has had some sort of a hand or foundation in. They've also just been known for holding lots of charity poker tournaments and galas. And even though they have been sued, and even though there are a lot of negative comments on the internet about them, some people even say like they want him dead, they want him in prison, like these terrible things. When you look at who Irving was as a child, how he rose to the level of success he has seen, and yes, he's ruthless, and yes, he's, infamously confrontational in his negotiations, I still don't think that he is out there pushing negativity on others. He's just standing firm in his business operations, is how it seems to me. I could be wrong. Now, Don Henley infamously stated at his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that Irving, quote, may be Satan, but he's our Satan. Quite a jarring statement, especially coming from someone as snotty and rude, in my opinion, as Don Henley is. But here's the other thing about this too. You have no idea what Irving could be saying about Don Henley behind his back. You can have these business contacts and you can have these partnerships in a lot of ways, but you could still be going home to your wife and, in your own four walls being like, that guy's a total asshole. But he's making me a lot of money, and that could be the situation between Irving and Don. I don't get the same energy from Irving that I get from Don Henley, personally. Now, when you put everything next to each other, though, and people do this on the internet quite a bit, they put together MCA's possible ties to the mafia, and then you put right next to that Irving's outrageous donations to the Democratic Party leading up to this merger between Ticketmaster and Live Nation, and then most recently, 2 or 3 months ago, all of these new accusations of collusion. It just doesn't look good for Irving. Is it possible he's changed and he's becoming more and more of a corrupted asshole? 100%. I think it's the recent events where people are now kind of digging up things from Irving's past, and now people are resurfacing MCA and the mafia ties and all of the donations that he's made, and then this whole merger that went on. He actually saved Ticketmaster in a lot of ways, and I don't know how many jobs he could have saved by doing that. How many people worked at Ticketmaster and would have been out of a job, and what would have happened to them? Would they have found other work? What would have happened to their families? What he did, he really did save that company. Of course, it benefits him, and of course, he's living the high life, but he also gives a lot back in charity and in his work in the community. So I'm very curious to know what you guys think of Irving Azoff, especially after hearing all of this. Do you think that he is, as many describe him, as a poisonous dwarf? That is his infamous nickname, the poisonous dwarf, because he's short and apparently very mean. But let me know what you think. If you've ever had a personal encounter with Irving, what were your thoughts? What sort of energy do you think he's putting in this world? And do you think it is a productive, positive energy or not? And if you like this type of content, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. You can also give me a super thanks. A super thanks is a button at the bottom of the play bar that allows you to donate any amount of money that you would like to the channel, or you can help directly with the research, as I sort of joke around and say, and buy me a coffee. If you buy me a coffee, I actually get less deductions, so I get more of that cash. But you could buy me a coffee, and I like to joke that helps directly with the research because you are caffeinating me. And of course, I will see you on the next Roots Rockumentary.
Hungry for the road all my life, thirsty for adventure all my youth, chasing all my freedoms down Liberty Avenue.